Hey everyone, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And this is Public Comment North Smithfield. News by the neighbors for the neighbors. We are local moms and small business owners just digging through the issues so you don't have to. We bring you facts and honest narratives in a format that fits your busy morning schedule. So we have a guest with us today.
Yes. Not a mom, but sort of. You have how many children do you have?
0.
Well, no, you're as a teacher.
Oh, sure. Hundreds,
Yeah. So technically you're sort of like a mom to just.
That's true. And it feels more like a mom every year, They're good kids, though. They're good kids.
Yeah. So Kevin is a good friend and a fellow member of the DTC and recently a candidate for North Smithfield Town Council.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Yay.
How do you feel? So we're recording this. We have a little bit of because Kevin's a good friend of us. You have not announced yet in our timeline, but by the time this releases, you will have announced. So as you kind of get up to that date, how are you feeling?
I'm excited. Yeah. I've been making the website and really thinking through, what I'm passionate about and what I want to do, if I were to be elected. And I'm just anxious to just start meeting people and knocking on doors. It's kind of like that meme of the let me in. I'm just let me knock,
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. And so you're zooming in to us from your campus, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's summer. So why are you there?
So this summer I have 2 students working with me. They get a little summer stipend and they work Monday through Thursday and we're going to do research together, which is going to be great. And then hopefully, they get a publication out of it or something. So they get that experience that they need to go to grad school. And it's getting more and more competitive every year. So
so these are undergrads. So these are
yeah,
babies.
undergrad. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really are
Awesome.
like a mom.
You're nurturing their young minds. It's so great.
I know, except today is day 1 and I asked them what time they wanted to start work and they said noon. And I laughed and I was like, okay, day 1 will start at noon, but we might need to fix that moving forward.
Yeah, you gotta slowly move the time up 15 minutes. Are you a morning person? Are you going to be knocking on doors at 6 a.m.?
I mean, I don't think anyone else would appreciate that. So I think for the betterment of my own likability, I probably won't. But if I could, sure.
Yeah.
So Kevin, tell us a little bit about what you teach and how that kind of relates to your campaign.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm a psychologist, but not like you two. So I teach social and political psychology. So kind of how do people interact as groups? How do people behave in groups? So group projects for the students, they tend to be very interested in understanding why group projects are so awful and why they can be good, but also, how can we get groups to get along? And so that also involves thinking a lot about Republicans and Democrats and how can we get them to get along, especially in the times that we are in right now where everything is so divisive. But then I also teach statistics and research methods and other kinds of methods-based courses, right? So a lot of how do you talk to other people and get them to tell you what matters to them? And then how can you understand what they said and then, make some understandings about the world, which is both important for the students who all want to become therapists and they need to get trained on how to talk to people. But I think it also helps, thinking about things like town council, right? Where you're going to have citizens come to you and they're going to have their concerns. And it's one thing to hear their concerns, but it's another thing to listen to their concerns and understand maybe, if someone might complain that, a light is out. And so there's a problem there that light is out on their street, but maybe it speaks to a larger problem of, how are we handling our lights in the town and how often do they check to see? And, the fact that we have to call a number to then let them know that a light is out and identify what light on 146 is out. Things like that is just, it's nice to be able to have that skill of kind of coming and having a greater understanding of what people are worried about.
Yeah, and for listeners who don't know what Kevin's referring to is in North Smithfield, the Department of Public Works does not handle reporting of any kind of outages. So if you have a traffic light out on your street, you have to call a number and it's a third-party contract. That is kind of expensive.
Because I think they also They don't like check town as well. Like they don't really do much of a drive-by to see where the lights are. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is required, like it's on the citizens to report the
Right.
outages.
Right, which is not helpful on, it's one thing if you're on like a quiet residential street where the speed limit is 10 miles an hour, but when you're, some areas in town where the speed limit is 50 miles an hour, like what does it look like for a citizen to be like stopping and writing down the like number that, this is like way at post number, whatever, and like,
And then to
call
know
that
to
in.
call
Yeah.
that number,
Right, right. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's talk of changing that, but there's always talk. And so I guess this sort of blends into, as you're running, if you were to sort of think about the top 3 things that are important to you, what are they?
I mean, I think first is kind of this idea of like transparency or like clarity. And so if we're thinking maybe just about that light, right? Like, how do I know what number to call? But just generally, when we look at our town website, like it's to find the information that we have all of these resources available to our town, but they're hard to get to. And then that also kind of translates into thinking broader about, communication abilities, right? So we don't have a centralized, like official town administrator Facebook page or town of North Smithfield run, being not just the administrator or town council, something when the blizzard this past year, right? We were kind of getting updates on a group by Administrator Scott Gibbs, which he was doing a great job updating us, but it was still just on a random page that not everyone is a part of and not everyone's getting consistent notifications on, and you have to check at certain points. And so it'd be nice to have that more centrally located and be able to, everyone can just quickly see what is the latest update of what's happening in town.
Yeah. Well, and I remember that because not everybody even knew that he was the town administrator, right? He would post an update, then he would get some comments where it's like, well, how do you know? And he was like, because I was just on the phone with the governor's office. Because again, there's nothing in that group that necessarily marks, this is who that somebody is an official,
right?
Someone acting in their official capacity versus just a private citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think on top of that too, it's kind of interesting that like our police department has their own official page that they put stuff out through, which is fantastic. And I love that they have that. But also it still begs the question of, okay, well, if the police department has gotten on board with this and is running this effectively, then why don't we have this for the town itself? And we definitely have people in communications as part of the town that handle things. So how can this be worked into that? Because it's definitely needed.
Yeah. All right. So that's number 1. What's number 2?
Yeah, number 2, probably going to say like the environment, right? And that for me reaches like a bunch of issues at once. So I think a lot about the quarry that I know that you've covered a little bit. And so like issues on the quarry, right? Like they're hurting our air, and the noise is part of our environment too, as well as the junkyard issue that we have in town as well, right? Like sludge is getting leaked onto and like affecting our neighbors and their environment. But I also think that there's like in that, like not just, I don't know, it's like environment now, but also for our future, right? Like if we're not protecting the environment right now, then what are we lining up for our kids and as well as other people who want to move to North Smithfield, right? If we want to have that growth, we need to be taking action, not just now, but also for the future. And I think in that, it all kind of ties together, but I think there's a social environment too that we need to be cognizant of and make sure that, I don't know, I was talking to someone yesterday actually on Memorial Day, and we were talking about the blizzard of 78, a classic conversation. And they were talking about how, someone's power had gone out and people were going and like bringing them food, right? And there was this big kind of like your classic story of like a small town community, right? Where people help out each other and respect each other and work together on issues. And I think maybe it's because of the political environment. I don't know, but I think we've lost some of that. And I'd really want to find a way to kind of bring us back into what makes North Smithfield special, which is having that small town where everybody knows each other and everyone wants to help each other out.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something where, we just covered Hallowell about the episode came out about a month ago. And one of the things that kind of occurs to me is like, we don't have a lot of centralized community spaces. There's the library, but it's not big. Like if, people have been in the library, like there's not a lot of huge meeting spaces there. There's Scouters Hall, which is struggling and needs huge updates.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think, like if somebody Heritage Hall, but I think that's now all run through the Heritage Association. That's not a government building anymore.
Right. And it's also still undergoing renovation. So it's
Right.
not even fully open.
Right. Yeah. And so I think when we think about community, it's like how it all kind of comes together with like environment and social environment and community gathering. Having spaces where people can actually come together and meet and connect, and even informally. Like one of the best things about going into Revive, the new coffee shop, new-ish, it's 2 years now, but is that people have actually like run into their neighbors there and been able to
Mhm.
to chat, and that's been I feel like such a benefit to the town. But it's like, how do we get more of that?
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, I think I just tried to look it up, but like, the library, great space, and but I think it's not as funded as it should be, right? Like Saturdays, wonderful time to go to the library, and it's open for 3 hours,
Yeah.
right? Like, not anything on the librarians, right? Like they're probably understaffed and they need their time off, but
They don't even have a furnace, so
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
let
mhm.
alone, right, like, and it's the shelves are all like, because there's not enough space, the shelves are all like the revolving shelves where they like have to compress and expand,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
which I think is like not ideal. Something about proper, if there's any librarians listening to this, if you want to jump in the comments, but like I think it's just like that's not the ideal way to be storing books from what I understand.
And I think third is affordability. And I don't think that's a shock to hear that, even when my wife and I, we moved back to North Smithfield about 3 years ago now, I think it is, maybe four. And, interest rates had, basically just gone up. And so they were pretty high, but it was like we were looking around and we had saved a lot to buy a house and it was still really tough. We got very lucky on getting the house that we have in North Smithfield. And it's a concern like across generations in the sense that, we want our community, right? And we want people to stay, but we're kind of pricing out our own children. But as well as that, then we also like our housing prices are getting so high because it's such a great place to live that it's also kind of pricing out our retired individuals as well with the property taxes. So I'm trying to find ways to think about housing in North Smithfield.
I mean, and
Yeah.
to be honest, we had a very similar experience to what you described, Kevin. Lived with my in-laws for a year or two after we moved back to Rhode Island and were looking for a house and could not afford to live in North Smithfield. We ended up having to move down to Foster to find kind of a house that fit our budget and what we wanted and needed. And we lived there for several years before finally being able to move back to North Smithfield, partially because we had built up enough equity in our house to then be able to move. But we also moved right at the time when interest rates spiked and it like broke my heart to give up my 2%
Oh,
Oh,
interest.
that's
well,
tough.
It really did. But at the same time, I think this is the struggle that a lot of people have is that we felt like North Smithfield was worth it. We
Yeah.
wanted to be in a smaller, closer town where we already knew people that were here. We already had that sense of social environment and community that you talked about. We're closer to family. And, my husband grew up here in town. So it very much felt like a homecoming. And, I'd give up that 2% interest rate to get all of that back. But it also meant that we were in a very privileged position to be able to even do that.
Yeah.
And there are so many individuals who would benefit from the amazing things that North Smithfield has to offer, but aren't necessarily in that position.
Yeah.
Um,
We have so many, like one of the things that was really remarkable to me about North Smithfield, and we were very like we slid in 2018, about a year and a half before COVID happened and housing prices just started skyrocketing. And so when we first got here, like my street was all older seniors, and over time those seniors have been moving out and like younger people have been moving in. And it's like not infrequent that the person moving in is like taking over their grandparents' house or a great aunt's house or something. It's like some kind of family transition. And that was one of the things that was like always really remarkable to me with how many students who graduated from North Smithfield high schools like wanted to come back to this town and raise their kids in this town. And to me, there's no stronger sort of like endorsement of town than like whether or not the kids who grew up here want to live here.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, Kevin, right? Like you grew up here and you moved back. Sarah, your husband grew up here and he moved back.
Yeah, I mean, when we were moving, I mean, 1 to 2 years, Sarah, that's very commendable. I think we lasted about 3 months, and I was like, we need to find our own place.
Were you living with your dad?
Yeah. I was living with my parents, and they're great people.
We have met Kevin's dad, and we call him Papa C. He's got a special place in our heart.
Yeah,
it was just weird living in your childhood bedroom. I felt like I
with your wife.
Yes, with my wife. But we were looking at a bunch of towns because we needed to, but we looked at North Smithfield specifically because the site we were using, I forget what it was, but North Smithfield schools are in the top 10 in the state, of all the cities, and that was really important to us that we find a place with a strong school system if we were going to have a family that we wanted to raise our kids with a strong school system. And so that was also a big draw, right? Like North Smithfield has a lot going for it. Not only now that we live 5 minutes away from mom and dad, which is wonderful. Again, I love that distance. It's better than 50 feet from mom and dad. So
it used to be long enough that they have to get into a car to come see you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless we have better sidewalks, then they could maybe make the walk. But until
that's
then,
true.
Yeah.
So we've talked a whole lot about community and people in your life and everything else. So who would you say in your life has really shaped how you think about community and responsibility? Because this seems like a really just strong core part of who you are.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely have to say my dad, Richard. Richard every now and then, Richard Carriere. I mean, he's one of a kind in the sense that he truly wants to get to know you. There is not a more curious man I have ever met than my dad. He will ask you 10 questions at once, and just keep asking you questions to learn more about you. And he's doing it because he just wants to know, and then he wants to know how he can help. He's very big on kind of like giving back and helping people. And I think he always kind of, instilled that on all of us. I'm one of 3 children. I think that was a big thing. And then he taught responsibility because when I was growing up, he had a big rule that was if we were to get a ticket, we had 24 hours to let him know. And that he wouldn't care and he'd be okay with it. Like if we told him within 24 hours, but if anything bad happened, we had to let him know within 24 hours. And so, I think that was this kind of thing of like, you need to be open and honest with me, but also like, it's an issue of like timeliness, right? Like letting people be informed of issues that come up in your life, not necessarily like scold you about it, but like, all right, let's work together now that we know. I think my dad was a big influence on kind of the idea of like, we need to at least acknowledge the issue.
Right.
And then find a way to come to what does that mean moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think speaking of acknowledging issues, like you have definitely had your moments in front of town council, the current town council, to bring attention to and kind of call out some of the issues that, around lack of transparency, lack of integrity, lack of ethics and stuff that have happened. So I'm curious, like, a little bit more, if you want to share a little bit more about kind of what goes through your head when you decide to go in front of town council during the public comment period and maybe how those experiences shaped your decision to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what goes through my head. Generally, it's, oh man, am I gonna go over 3 minutes? I wish the clock was in front of me instead of behind me.
Mm-hmm.
In research, like it takes a lot to get people to do anything. They have to be really passionate and really upset about it. When people come to speak, I felt like a lot of people were getting kind of brushed over, or sometimes it felt maybe performative in weird ways. I think it's a really important space. And I think it was frustrating in the sense that as you watch the town council meetings and you're there and people come and make these public comments, they say like, great, thanks. And then they just move on. And I don't think that those public comments ever get brought up again, right? I think the current town council, for all that they do, at least from a observer, feel like they're not actively taking action, if that makes sense, right? Like they're very willing to kind of just let things be, hear the complaints, but then just kind of move on to the agenda. And they're not being proactive, right? They're not, maybe they're being a little reactive, like, oh, everyone's been talking about this, so now we need to respond. But I think it's a matter of we need a town council that is proactive to the issues, right? That, okay, so we have this issue with the quarry. What are we doing now for the quarry? But I also care about what are we doing to make sure quarry 2.0 doesn't occur in 20 years.
Right.
I don't think like the town council has passed anything of significance since I've been, really paying attention.
There have been no ordinances passed. I think there's been a couple of resolutions, I think not even many resolutions, right? For a body that's, it's interesting. Like their first responsibility is to legislate over the town. There's very little legislating happening.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of ideas that are mentioned and some grumbling of like, oh yeah, and then no one comes back with anything drafted. Like there's never anything that gets presented.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that exactly as you said, right? Like it's a legislative body. Let's have our legislative body actually legislate some issue. And so the fact that they haven't passed any new ordinances for the town, ordinance means like, town laws, doesn't seem like they're doing the job that I would have expected a town council to do.
Sure. And so let's say, so it's January 2027 and you've been elected and you walk in your first day on town council. And let's say, you had your dream or, you got like one thing that you could pass with no, like you one freebie. What would it be?
Oof, man, there's so many though.
I know. See, it's fun because Sarah sent you a list of questions and I was like, I'm not following any of these. I'm going to make them sweat.
I mean, I think like
So much
a
for all
dream
that
one,
prep work,
which
Kevin.
I'll try to make it not too like in the weeds, as they say. But I think it's important that we have on the town website a clear visualization of where our budget is, like how much has been spent of the budget, where that spending is going. And I'm not saying it has to be updated daily. I feel like that's probably a lot of work that we don't have the capacity for. Even bi-weekly, right? Like every other week, have an update on, where is spending going?
Well,
Are
after
we
each town
under
council
budget,
meeting, right?
over
Like the one thing they do every town council meeting is pay the bills.
Right. That's true. Yeah. And so where is that money going? How are we doing? Are we, kind of projecting towards a deficit? Are we projecting towards a surplus? I think especially as we move into budget season, right? I think it's really tough to even like looking at the property taxes and thinking about, how much are we contributing to the town and where is that money going? I think that's an important, responsible thing that, my wife and I balance our checkbooks every week. We write down every single spending and see where it's going in the various categories. But also just, I think it needs to help us inform what are we losing when we are having these budget discussions? Because I think a lot of times we talk about where is that money going? But if we had a better visualization and understanding of where that money is going, we also can start to have conversations about where that money is not going.
Sure. Sure.
So that would be my one thing is make the budget more accessible and readable to a broader North Smithfield audience.
Well, and you did that, right? North Smithfield townpolitics.com. There's a budget
that's
tool
true.
that was
made the
by
budget
Kevin.
tool for the police bond.
I think the other piece of this too is that when you go up in front of them and you ask for this information, one, you aren't getting it. And on top of that, it means that the information that's accessible to voters in order to make an informed decision just isn't there. Because we should be able to, as citizens of this town, have all of the information available to us, which includes all of the financial pieces, because it was a financial question.
Yeah.
Should we take out this bond in order to renovate the police station? And I think, it's a twofold question. One, should we renovate the police station? Obviously, that's a yes. I don't think anyone wants to work in a place that's literally falling down around their ears.
Mhm.
But then the other piece is this amount sufficient in order to do that? And there were a lot of people having discussions about this special election where they said, yes, I believe the police station should be renovated, but I don't trust the numbers
Right.
that have come out.
And like
Good.
I credit my mom and my dad. My dad is a financial advisor. My mom's a tax preparer. So like I have been raised in a way of like trying to understand finances. But like it took me a lot of time to sit through and sift through all these different documents that are on the town website and find the right line. And like I think it took way more work than the average citizen should ever be expected to put in to then
Mhm.
know on February 9th whether or not we're going to spend the town's money like this.
Yeah.
And where is that money going to go?
Yeah. Well, and my husband Ryan, I've said this before, like my husband Ryan is on the budget committee and they meet every other Thursday for months. And they hear from all the town departments come forward and say, this is how much we need, this is what we're asking for, this is what it's for. The budget committee meets and pours over that data, comes up with a grand proposal, puts it in front of town council. Like this is a long term, I mean, it's like half of the year really just goes towards putting together this budget. And then with that comes long-term capital planning and decisions
Mhm.
around like how much can we sustain raising taxes. And the reason why we have these people is because the average citizen shouldn't be expected to sit down and pour through a 30-page document, right?
Sure.
And at
Mhm.
the same time, it's in the responsibility of public officials to make that information accessible and understandable so that
Yeah.
people can make informed choices.
So, walk us through how you would approach a decision where something like the town's budget and a community need are in direct conflict. How would you approach something like that?
I feel like that's a weird question in the sense that the budget reflects the community need. And so to have them in conflict seems to be, like, I guess, like, I would think of it more as what happens when we have two needs that are in conflict with each other,
Sure.
right? Rather than like the budget being in conflict with the need. It's, do we want to pay and make progress on the Hallowell Center, or do we want to do something else with that money, right? Like that's kind of a conflict there. And I think it's obviously going to depend on the certain time and the needs that are in conflict, but I think regardless of what those needs are, what we need is it's going to be a hard decision, right? It's going to be a hard decision for budget to make their recommendation. It's going to be a hard decision for town council to make their decision on that. But both of those require two things, I would say. I'd say like one is transparency.
Mhm.
So, like what is the process that has been going to make this decision and how clear is it that this decision was made in a certain way, and well as timeliness. So both in terms of thinking about like the timeliness of the project's needs. So, if we don't fund this now, will we have to pay 3 times as much when we need to renovate the police station again in the future? And
Yeah.
also the timeliness as far as discussing it, right? So if we know coming into budget season what the issues are, right? Like I don't think what is being discussed when we get to budget, as Elizabeth, you said, right? This is like a 6-month discussion
Yeah.
that is ongoing. And so we need to ensure that the hard decisions that we can kind of look ahead and say, this is going to be a problem, that we are timely and thinking about that decision and, be able to let our town citizens come and comment on that and hear their perspectives as well. But people are okay. They think that the process, even if the outcome isn't what I wanted, right? So I wanted funding X and funding Y instead gets funded. I'm okay with it as long as I felt that the process was fair,
Yeah.
right? Like what matters
Yep.
more isn't the outcome, it's how we got to the outcome that kind of determines how people react to it. And so when we're looking at people being upset about any issue, I think it comes back to being reflective. How can we make the process better
Yeah.
for the future?
Yeah, that's fair.
So, we've talked a lot about some of the issues in town, right? And while I think it's helpful to talk about some of those issues, there's also quite a few things that North Smithfield gets right. So, what are some things that you would work towards protecting in North Smithfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already mentioned one of them, right, is our schools. Robin and I moved back to Rhode Island or back to North Smithfield, because of how our schools are rated. They're great schools, and so I would want to keep them that way, right? So looking to our buildings, are they up to date? I know that one great thing about North Smithfield right now is that we actually are increasing in our younger population. So we have more like new families getting started, and our elementary school is growing, which is wonderful. But at the same time, is it growing like too fast? Like, do we have the space in order to adequately address and serve our children? I know that like the elementary school has one nurse, right? Which is crazy. And you think about how many children that she is, or he, I don't actually know. But
Oh, we get calls from the nurse a lot. It's a she. She's lovely.
okay, she
Yeah.
is lovely.
Shout out to Miss O'Neill. She is
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes. We love Miss O'Neill in this house.
Yeah. But absolutely, like to your point, does she have too much on her plate? Not to say that she isn't effective at her job, but I think there's something like 500 kids in the elementary school, right? And one school nurse. So is that something that could be improved on?
Well, and we're also getting the COVID bubble right now, right? So during the pandemic, people are at home and not a lot to do. And historically, when people are at home with not a lot to do, they make babies. And so we have a bunch of, these 2019, 2020, 2021 kids entering the school system right now. And so I know there's a little bit of a question of like, are we going to kind of have this bubble and then it's going to sort of like retreat back to a more stable class size, or are we going to keep seeing progressive growth year over year? And I think there's two different camps in that.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other things that you would want to protect in North Smithfield, Kevin?
I mean, I think there's also just, I don't know how to describe it, like the North Smithfield town feel, right? That it is it's always weird for me to say like we're rural in the sense, but like we're not rural if you're looking at like California, right? We're Rhode Island rural or maybe New England rural. But I think there's something to be said about that, that small town community that I think, does reflect Rhode Island or reflects North Smithfield and Rhode Island broader, that, people know each other and people want to help out. I think that's great. And with that, comes protecting our environment, looking out and seeing the beautiful trees. And I think, protecting our environment for, again, like our future generations. And in that, I think it's this community feel. I ran the North Smithfield Sports Association 5K. It was my first ever 5K, but I was able to do it without not running, which was my goal. But, it was great. And you got to like run through this like, beautiful, outdoor like scenery, and everyone's, kind of running on the roads, and it was gorgeous. And it was a great event, right? Like everyone came together. The Memorial Day parade got canceled because of rain, but we still had the ceremony outside of Old Town Hall, and that was wonderful and nice. I want to keep that, right? I want to find ways for us to grow and bring in more individuals, bring in space to help kind of keep costs low and vibrant, right? Bring in that new family, but somehow find a way to still keep North Smithfield.
Yeah. I think that's hard because I think this is what you hear a lot is like keep North Smithfield rural is what people say a lot. And I don't know that there's necessarily one definition for what that means, but I think what most people are talking about is that having green space, having wildlife, having not feeling overcrowded or like that people are kind of bursting at the seams here. And at the same time, we just finished the 146 project, or it's wrapping up now. Cities are getting more expensive. People our age are having more kids. They want a place to raise them. Like the people are coming, whether we want them to come or not. It's going to happen. And so the question is, how do you think you balance that, recognizing that there's going to be an influx of new families, some of those potentially even being returning families, while also, wanting to maintain the kind of the Rhode Island rural character.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean like being like a not in my back door-y kind of like against development, right? I think, I mean, when I moved back, I was so excited when Revive started because I was like, this is amazing, right? Like it's a cute place. It fits perfectly in like where it's located. And I was like, this is a great example of like how North Smithfield can kind of adapt and grow. But, I think Robin and I, my wife, when we talk about when you move, right, you tell the United States Post Office that you're moving and they update your mailing address, and then you get all these mailers saying like, welcome to your new home, or like, congratulations, and you get some discounts from all these random places. And I kind of would expect a small town like North Smithfield to have a similar-ish thing, like a little welcome packet. Welcome to North Smithfield. Here's, information about our schools, our police department. Maybe have companies kind of offer like a free like a coupon for 20% off something, or a list of companies in North Smithfield who does gutters, who does landscaping, right? Like these can all be things that someone who moves to North Smithfield, like get them involved in the community right away, right? Like let's welcome them to North Smithfield.
I think having that kind of welcome packet of local businesses is really helpful, because otherwise people will go online to find out what's in the area. And at that point, your business can get missed simply because you don't know how to build a website, or you don't know enough about SEO. I have no clue what it's called, but on 146A, this is going to sound so Rhode Island, but on 146A, when you're going north and you're at at Little General and the light, right? That whole plot right there, I think it was like an old industrial building or something like that, has been sold finally, and is going to be developed into an apartment complex. And so, I mean, that is also kind of a rough stretch of 146, simply because you have the light a little bit farther up that goes to School Street. You also have the Shell station, so everyone is turning off and on. My street is right near there, and so it can be kind of hard already for us to get in and out with traffic going around. And then now you're also adding this whole apartment complex. And the feedback I've gotten has been like, no one's upset about the apartment complex, at least the people I've talked to. Let's be clear. They haven't been upset about the apartment complex. They've been upset about the traffic and what's going to happen with the traffic, because now you have a whole complex worth of people who are having to get in and out of their house and their parking lot throughout the day. But at the same time, you are going to be like 50 feet from a stoplight. And so you can't really add another stoplight that close. It's just too much. But we have all of these new people who could be moving in too, who don't really know the community. And what better way to continue to foster that social environment that you've mentioned than to have something that intentionally brings them in and makes them feel welcome.
I mean, like I also grew up very near your home, Sarah, and I can't remember that like place ever. Like so in 30 years, I think it's always been just like empty and abandoned. So I'm very excited to hear that they're finally doing something with that. I think it was a Tupperware place maybe before, but
It was something like that. I mean, I've been with my husband for almost 20 years now, and that place has been abandoned the whole entire time. So,
well, and that's, I think, part of city planning is how do we simultaneously, like, we don't want abandoned buildings. And I think this is the thing that is hard with balancing, right? Is like, we don't want properties like with the milk can, just sitting for years and years and years, falling into disrepair. That's an eyesore. It's a danger. It's dangerous. It's a waste of space. How do we encourage people who want to come in and develop it into something that's going to benefit the town while simultaneously planning for the long-term implications to the schools, the traffic, more cars means more road repair, right? Like more people just means more cost. And, again, coming back to planning, right? There has to be a plan.
yeah.
So Kevin, it's let's pretend it's August. You're out, you're hitting the roads, you've got your sneakers on, you're knocking. I answer my door. Give me your pitch. You've got 2 minutes.
Hi there. Nice to meet you. What is your name?
Elizabeth.
Nice to meet you, Elizabeth. I'm Kevin Carriere, and I'm running for North Smithfield Town Council. I'm running because, what I want a town council that is responsive to the needs of its citizens. I want a town council that is respectful of all of its citizens, and I want a town council that will actually do its job and pass ordinances that protect us in the now and in the future. And if that means holding everyone responsible to the laws of our town, so that's, making sure that businesses are getting citations, right? Empowering, that's telling our police department, like, you should be ticketing people that are blasting when they shouldn't be, right? If there's a noise violation, like, let's hold those businesses to account. Or if they are chopping down trees that are public property without prior permits, right? Like, we need to make sure that everyone, regardless of who they are, is being held to the same standards. So that way we can get that community that is what makes North Smithfield great.
There you go. Sarah, do you have any closing questions?
One last question, and it's a question about a question. So, what question do you wish someone would ask you that nobody ever does?
Oh. See, I'm wondering, do you mean like personal or like also related to my running?
However you want to take it.
Dealer's choice.
Okay. I guess, I mean, I haven't been knocking, but as I talk to people about running for town council and as I think through it myself, I feel like one question that doesn't get asked, and I think it is important, is what is the role of a town councilor? What do they actually do? But like, I think about it too for any kind of like political official, right? Like, is their goal to, like, when we elect somebody, are we electing them to be a representative of us? Or are we electing them saying, like, I trust you, do whatever you want? And I think those are two different ways that you can look at what a elected official is. And so I would say that, you know, a town councilor is our, as we've talked about, it's our legislative branch. If town administrator Gibbs, we can think of him as like the president of the town in a way. Town council is Congress. And so their job is to pass laws that help North Smithfield like operate. And so they should be passing laws that are issues that the community cares about. So I see the role of a town councilor as someone who represents the people that elect them and the people that didn't vote for them, right? Representing the town. And that is proactive, as we've been talking about, right? That we learn from the past. So we see what went wrong and then we make sure that it doesn't happen again. And so doing that, right? Being more proactive does require a town councilor that is willing to do research, right? Like, get into the weeds on the issues, kind of learn and listen from our volunteers and acting on the recommendations of our boards and commissions. It also means coming to meetings, having read everything and being active and engaged in the conversations. It's being informed both on what we're doing at this meeting, but also what are we doing 3 meetings from now, right? Because you're here for 2 years. Like, let's focus on what you can do in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
All right. Where can folks find you? How can they follow along with your campaign? How can they donate? How can they learn more about you?
Yep. So I have a website. It's kevinforns.com. And you also can find that on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Very nice. Sarah, do you want to tell everyone where they can find us and take us out?
Absolutely. Everyone can find us at nspubliccomment.com. We are also on Facebook and Instagram at Public Comment North Smithfield. We have a page and we have a group. If you are a resident of the town, please, please, please come join the group. We can continue to have these fantastic conversations. And one of the best things is that you know that you're having these conversations with other people who live in town and are just as invested as you are. So we'd love to see you there.
All right. See you next time.
See you guys.
All right.